Alright, hello everyone, how are you all doing today? I myself am doing rather well. Welcome to my review and summary of Stargirl episode 6, which is definitely, it quickly became one of my favorite episodes actually. Because while it still has some oopsie doopsie cringe, it doesn't actually detract anything from the episode, unlike the last few episodes. And it left me stunned at how good certain scenes got. I'll of course go more into detail as we go along. No flashback this episode. Funnily enough, it starts with a football game, which you can see on screen right here, and a tone of high energy and excitement and things like that. The only real cringe moment here is the reveal of the red shirt football player. She is a female, and look how tiny she is. I think this is very awkward, but mind you, she is the daughter of two supervillains, so she can easily have advanced strength or things that help her compete at a male level. Now, I have to say that I'm very close to forgiving this scene because of those reasons. And even the fact as well, the principal is also a supervillain. Principal Bowen, I believe. So they are close and they'll all pull strings for each other to make it work. The parents are revealed this episode to be Sportsmaster and Tigress, and they are both very competitive and easily slighted on their daughter's behalf. He already punched another player on the team for making fun of her. That she's not too good or anything, and she gets benched because of this, which leads her parents, you'll see pretty soon enough, to take care of the coach. And we actually find out in a little while that they've done this multiple times. While death being the only outcome for these poor coaches, I personally like that these guys are so petty, because once again, it lets us know that the villains are individuals, but who are all still working towards the same goal. And so, this is exactly what you want out of a team, and especially out of a team of villains too. Really quite nice in my opinion. I do want more of this stuff, definitely. Although, while it is one of the best parts of the show, I think they should cut back on it to focus on making our heroes more heroic, after all. Next up, we get a scene with Icicle waking up in the middle of the night, and then we get him reprimanding Sportsmaster and Icicle when he finds them burying the coach's body. He catches them in the act, and he's up late at night as well. With that, he does end up telling them to also break their suits out, because they're going to be going on a mission soon. This is all happening at night, and it is happening the same night that Courtney was out. Parallel to Courtney coming home, she gets busted by Pat. He tells her to collect Wildcat's suit and Dr. Midnight's goggles, while he goes and tries to wrestle the Hourman's hourglass from Rick, the son of the last Hourman, Rex, I believe. A decent setup for some character moments, although they're a bit squandered. They play it quite on the nose, with like Yolanda being very guilt trippy about it. She's all being happy and things of that nature. Also in the morning, we catch Mike building a sugary volcano from candy from the Halloween episode, which was apparently last episode, and he discourages his family from coming to his science fair later that day. Some decent scenes go by. I'm not going to lie, I did at least enjoy some of these next few scenes. The following scenes, though, are not so great. Actually, they're kind of pathetic, really. Once again, they go back to my complaints. Yolanda feeds Courtney some nonsense about getting a second chance and thanks her for being chosen, while Beth is in the middle of the library, talking to the goggles out loud, absolutely being the worst at being a superhero. And I'll remind you as well, she stole those goggles. This is still not being addressed in the show, it just kind of moves on. Beth continues to be a spaz, and I really like to just move on from her. The less focus on her, the better the show gets, honestly. Because I've had these complaints before, you don't have to worry too much about that. After these two individual scenes, Courtney goes to tell them at lunchtime, only to be double-teamed with shame once she admits that she wants their power items back. But fine. Yolanda, I can at least understand what her story is supposed to be, what she's supposed to be going through, even if the show itself, I feel, doesn't properly portray her struggles. But Beth has absolutely no right to those goggles. She's prancing around, and it really has been bugging me that she's just a socially awkward cartoon character that brings nothing to the team. She is just the voice to relay information that the goggles tell her. Later in the show, even her actions are completely based on the goggles telling her what to do. I'm sorry, but come on now. She is the weakest character, honestly. But let's move on to Pat and Rick. Pat shows Rick his uncle's truck. It still has the punch in it. It shows Pat trying to fix it. Like, how are you gonna get that out, honestly? Pat in this scene does try to instill a lesson of self-control and self-restraint into Rick. He's just too angry to listen, though. He can't take these words to heart. Pat also asks for Rick's help in deciphering his father's notebook, but unfortunately he has no idea how to do so. Before they separate, Pat tries to get the hourglass and the notebook back from Rick, but of course these items belonged to Rick's father, so Rick reasons that they were both belongings of his father's and therefore his belongings now. Which everybody is just kind of like, fair enough. Back to the football field, there is a 10-second moment that was cut out of the CW version where the new football coach is introduced to the team, and once again it's a little awkward, and this is probably the only time I'll say the CW version was better than the DC Universe version, simply because of the cringe you get to avoid. We have the gambler walk up to Sportsmaster and his wife, who are both seated near the football team. The gambler is there to give them the details of their upcoming mission, but that's not quite the thing I'd like to focus on, really. No, I'd like to once again put a spotlight on the relationships. This time between the gambler and Sportsmaster and Tigress. Sportsmaster quickly tells the gambler not to bet against the Blue Valley football team, and Tigress hardly wants to look at the man. When the gambler has passed on the mission details, he's all being basically a troll to them, just kind of sarcastic and almost nonchalant about everything. He tries to say that they're friends, but they both are disgusted by the idea of being friends with the gambler. So much so that when he goes to leave, they remind him that he should pick up some trash that he dropped at the beginning of the scene. The gambler, of course, does so sarcastically to make sure every action is clear. He shakes the bag in the air, and God, do I enjoy the villains and their relationships to one another. Once again, I'd like to repeat myself that these people are all individuals who still share the same goal. They are all seemingly loyal to Icicle so far. And so far, they're all on the same page and things of that nature. While some of them can despise each other, they're not all just friendly, and they're not all just ready to betray each other. We then get another fun relationship scene, actually, when we go to Mike's school, and Mike is utterly alone. Everyone's having fun with their families, showing off their projects. Everyone has their families with them. But of course, at the beginning of the episode, he had told them not to show up. But seemingly like a hero on her own right, coming in at the last moment, Barbara comes in, having been able to get off of work early, and lets Mike demonstrate his candy volcano for her. It's a nice family bonding moment, especially when the series kind of has been purely focused on Courtney and her relationships. Not that their bonds are really tightening, but, you know, the bonds between step-parent and stepchild should grow in some form, and this was a scene that really helped elevate the show. For me personally, I know it could be a bit distracting for some people. Speaking of the bonding in this episode, the next scene, Courtney actually defends Pat from ridicule from Rick. Rick believes that Pat brought nothing to the superheroes he fought alongside in the past, and she just says something simple like, "See, he's not useless," or something of that nature. As you can see on the screen right now, the scene playing out, Rick asks Beth to see if the Dr. Midnight goggles could decipher his father's code, but it's to no avail. Nothing really comes from it. The goggles can't decipher it, so they're not all-knowing. So they can't be the big Deus Ex Machina, but they're still pretty bad in terms of just information feeding, and these goggles can track hackers as well. We later find out. Courtney is then undermined by the others when, through the goggles, they catch wind that the gambler is hacking into something. He must be an easy mark, right? Courtney ends up agreeing, but adds that they all go in costume to hide their identities. This is all building to some stuff later on, so I'm saving some comments for then. We do get a funny little scene where the sportsmaster and Tigress have to explain to their daughter that they will be having a date night, which their daughter says they never do. It's funny because, yeah, you can see that they're so competitive that they just keep on working on themselves and working on her and things like that of that nature. In fact, before they leave, they assign some workouts for Artemis to do. That's her name. Next, a really good scene with Icicle and his son at a diner where a waitress misunderstands whose birthday they were there to celebrate. Or at something of that nature to honor that of Icicle's wife, who we already know is dead. Really good stuff, honestly. Pat gets home to find Courtney missing again, and Barbara and Mike are eating what remains of the candy volcano. Barbara, of course, tells him that she said she was out with some friends, and Pat quickly pieces together what's going on. And then it's about game time. Part of our new JSA show up fully in costume. Only Stargirl and our girl look good though. And Wildcat is really close to looking good. It's just that helmet, the cheeks especially. It's just something so off-putting about them. And Beth just... ugh, a goofball. But not in a way that I can laugh with or even laugh at, which is a bit sad. Let's see. The Gambler... oh, yes, they're ready to take on the Gambler, except before they do so, they, in a brief moment of kind of like clarity, kind of like jumping into a pool of ice water, they find a dead security guard, and horror crosses some of their faces because they were starting to understand the dangers of the situation they're facing. The danger is right in front of them now. A man is dead. They, of course, try to continue their search for the Gambler, but it's not him who's there. It's not him who they run into. It's Sportsmaster and Tigress, who have decent costumes, especially Sportsmaster. The two could use some sprucing up a bit, though, especially Tigress. It should be very easy to figure out who her secret identity is, because she just has a star painted on one side of her face. This is where things get wild, a fight breaks out, and soon it's Wildcat versus Tigress and Our Man versus Sportsmaster, and they are just outclassed throughout their respective fights. Despite the super strength, Our Man cannot stand against Sportsmaster, and Wildcat, despite her advanced agility, can't keep up with Tigress. Some decent effects throughout the fight, nothing really laughable, but just kind of cartoony for sure. Wildcat has to be bailed out of her fight by Beth with a fire extinguisher, but it wasn't even Beth's idea. It was the goggles once again. Do you get why I keep saying that she's kind of just a voice for the goggles, not really a character in her own right, not really a hero in her own right, especially when she goes around telling everybody that they're superheroes and using their code names all willy-nilly. Wildcat and Beth were fighting on the inside of this building. Sportsmaster and Our Man had taken their fight to the outside of the building. Sportsmaster once again is dominating Our Man despite his super strength, and Courtney has to come in and square off against Sportsmaster, and she's just good enough to make him get serious, and when he does so, he soundly defeats her as well. So that was quite nice to see that these kids are kind of over-fluffing themselves and promptly being beaten down and put into their place. Especially when Tigress comes into play and they just start wiping the floor with Stargirl. It's a brutal beatdown. Stargirl has to retreat to her friends who have gathered together after recovering from their fights, from their respective fights. The villains are confident that they can take on these 4 kids who are already beaten up and quickly losing confidence. But they themselves lose confidence when from the air, Pat's mobile suit, or whatever you'd like to call it, the mech suit Stripe, comes down. The battle is over at that point because they don't exactly know what this robot is capable of or things of that nature, so they throw a flashbang into the air and make their retreat. So, with everybody safe, they make their way back to Pat's garage. Our heroes lick their wounds, and Courtney starts going through her lists of complaints. Courtney starts saying things like it's annoying how they're not listening to her, how it's frustrating that they keep going off on their own and not listening to what she says, and Pat is just there agreeing with her because of course he's been going through this stuff with her. Finally, Courtney seems to come to an understanding with what she's been putting Pat through. More bonding! I love this stuff. We leave them on a note that kinda shouts, yes, it's finally time for what I've been begging this show for. It's finally time to train. So excited. Final thing that happens is that the ISA decide to gather more information on this new JSA. If I may be premature here, my current recommendation for this series is strong, actually. Because you don't have to necessarily watch this show for Stargirl. You can watch it for Pat and the villains, and they are carrying this show. But the writing is there. There's potential for this show to get even better. I know some people don't want to wait 6 or 7 episodes for a show to start getting good, but I feel that sometimes things do need to be properly set up. Currently, the prospects are quite decent, and I feel that it'll be a shame if this series was to end before it got into its full stride. So be sure to subscribe and join me in the next episode. Leave a comment down below about your thoughts on this one and where do you think it's all headed to. If you have your own fan theories and stuff like that, go ahead and leave a comment in the comment section down below and things of that nature. If you enjoyed this content, go ahead and leave a like. Otherwise, I'll see you guys next time. Go ahead and take care.